poruka za sve zemlje regiona da bi ovih 6 milijardi trebalo spustiti u lokal, što znači da svih 6 vlada treba da usvoje reformske agende. Ima nekoliko ozbiljnih, završenih, pripremljenih dokumenata u regionu, ali još nijedna zemlja nije usvojila reformsku agendu. Mislim da je to za berlinski proces jako važno i da ćemo uskoro imati neki rezultat po tom pitanju. Dobro, evo sad prelazimo na prvi blok koji je posvećen u stvari jednoj retrospektivi dekade, 10 godina berlinskog procesa i šta možemo očekivati na jesen u susret novoj sesiji berlinskog procesa, samita iza koga onda dolazi mnogo toga. Učesnici prvoga panela su ministar Filip Ivanović, ambasador Peter Felten, pozivam ga da nam se pridruži, i ambasadorka Melsom. Samo jedan čas da... I will try now to switch in English, respecting our guest. I understand that our minister also will follow official language of this panel will be English this time in our Montenegro. So it is also small contribution to internationalization and now integration. So of course we have a lot of provocative and interesting questions for this interesting topic, such as Berlin process, and we are raising a lot of expectation for next summit. As always, there are plus of optimism when we talk about European integration in Montenegro specifically. So I will first delegate my question to Minister Ivanović. We all are fully aware that Montenegro always fully respects the regional cooperation agenda, and today in focus is Berlin process as very inclusive one. So Montenegro was recognized as country respecting all results achieving in this period. From perspective of Montenegro, of our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, how you can estimate achievements from our position? Do we participate always fully? And what about today and tomorrow regarding our contribution to the Berlin process and regional initiatives?
Hvala. Samo na početku da kažem da obično preferiram kad sam u zemlji da govorim na našem jeziku, ali ovo je neka vrsta ustupka i poštovanja prema gostima, pa ću nastaviti na engleskom. I would like to start with a semi-joke. When I saw the title of the panel, Challenges and Opportunities, I thought to myself, this is probably the 10th panel that mentions Western Balkans or Montenegro where challenges and opportunities are mentioned. So obviously everybody, not just here in the region, but also in some other countries where I participated in similar panels, see Western Balkans as something that needs to be, that challenges need to be ascribed to, but not just challenges, but also opportunities. And I really believe that this is the attitude that we should have towards various issues and various questions. That every type of challenge or every type of crisis is in the same time an opportunity. And actually the root of the word crisis is ancient Greek krisis, which is actually a moment of decision in its origin. So it means that you are faced with a moment in which you should reach a certain decision. Depending on that decision, this decision will somehow determine the future and what happens next. I heard from the dear ambassador of Norway two, I would say, important things. One is the example of Nordic countries, and my colleagues here know that I very often speak about the Nordic example, being someone who lived 4.5 years in Norway. And she also mentioned overcoming historical challenges. So Scandinavian or Nordic model is a perfect example. I will not go into history, perhaps you will, but the Nordic countries have different kinds of ups and downs, let's say it like that, in their relationships over the centuries. But now they cooperate, I would say, almost perfectly. We also had here in this region different ups and downs in our history, but we still do not cooperate perfectly. Although most of the countries of the region have languages that are mutually understandable, have very similar cultural and historical heritage, are very much close. Many of the countries lived in the same country until a few decades ago. So these should all be the advantages of regional cooperation. Unfortunately, sometimes these advantages are turned into disadvantages, depending on different historical interpretations, depending on different political ideas and interests. We still do not cooperate in a way that should be praised. Regional cooperation is not important just for ourselves. It is a prerequisite for the European integration. If we cannot work together, those who are the closest ones that we share borders with and all of these other things that I mentioned, then how are we going to cooperate within a much broader area of European Union and with much more different countries and peoples? So I would say that regional cooperation, including the Berlin process, which is perhaps the leading initiative in the region of Western Balkans, is a sort of a laboratory for European integration, and it is also a sort of a test for European integration. Because as I said, if you can't work together in the number of 5 or 6 or 7, then how are you going to work together in a number of 28? And I intentionally say 28 because this is our goal in the next few years, or 30, 32, 33, and so on. But to be more concrete, 10 years have passed, and as I said in my opening speech, Montenegro has really tried, and I hope succeeded, to be an active and credible actor in the Berlin process. So far, you know that we have 4 mobility agreements that were ratified by Montenegro. We ratified all 4. Not all the countries ratified all 4, but for it to be in vigor, it needs to be ratified by everyone, so we are hoping that also others will follow. The 5th mobility agreement on access to higher education is being consolidated and discussed. I hope this will be finalized at the summit or meeting in October. And this tells you another thing, and it proves what we have been also advocating for. On the one hand, we support the European integration of all candidate countries. And we believe that every country that wants to become member of the European Union should become member of the European Union, of course upon certain conditionality. But on the other hand, we also always say that this approach should be merit-based. The integration should be merit-based, not as a train, but as specific countries based on their merit should get closer and closer to the European Union. So this kind of approach, I think, will also be a sort of encouragement and incentive also to other countries to do more and to do more faster. The new action plan for the common regional market from 25 to 28 is also in the phase of being agreed upon, so I believe that this will also open new opportunities of cooperation. We have, as you know, the Regional Cooperation Council, the RCC, that's following and implementing many of these initiatives of cooperation. I must mention that there have been also some hiccups in the work of the RCC as well in the past years. Now I hope that with the election of the new Secretary General, this is going to be overcome, and we have promises from our friends from Bosnia and Herzegovina that the approach will be inclusive and that it will be fostered, the dialogue will be fostered so that we can overcome certain problems that we had in the past. Going to the declared, so to say, results in the past 10 years of the Berlin process, we could say that those are establishing stability, building on good neighborly relations. So I'm saying on purpose declared results. So we'll need to evaluate which of these results is fulfilled fully, which is not fulfilled fully, and so on. So more individual or national and regional stability and good neighborly relations, modernization of countries to different projects in infrastructure, digitalization, tourism, economy, science, research, and so on. Cooperation in the field of economy through various trade easements and different benefits. Encouraging and facilitating greater mobility, talking about conflicts, reconciliation, facing the past, these historical challenges that the ambassador had mentioned, overcoming the animosity or enmity that exists between certain communities and certain groups in the region, unfortunately, including, of course, civil society, including the youth. We have also the Regional Youth Council, RAICO, which is also a very good and important thing here in the region. And of course, fight against organized crime and corruption, establishing rule of law. These two, as you know, have been crucial for the advancement in European integration since the new methodology has been adopted. Speaking of that, I must, of course, as a foreign minister of Montenegro, say that and praise Montenegrin achievement that has been recognized at the Intergovernmental Conference at the end of June in Brussels, where we got the positive interim benchmark assessment report and got the closing benchmarks. So this is something that we need to be working on in the next couple of years. So I would stop here and give the opportunity to others, so perhaps we can speak in more detail later.
Thank you, Minister, for these remarks about an overview of Montenegrin participation within the Berlin process, and of course to confirm our readiness that we will fully cooperate also in this 10th summit in Berlin this autumn. So we can link it with the question to Ambassador of Germany, dear Ambassador Felten. I will not remind you, of course, when it all starts. Maybe you will respond it much better than me from perspective of your country, but definitely it was one very important initiative. For me, as an economist, I always like to stress that it was for the first also important for economy and for additional mobilization of funds for our important infrastructural projects within the connectivity agenda, what was in the early beginning key topic. Then later it spread towards other policies and, of course, establishment of different modes of cooperation. On behalf of our civil society, I can confirm that I will go in Skopje next week, and participation from Montenegrin side regarding civil society will be confirmed. We will also fight for improvement of regional cooperation. From your point of view, how it is still today? Is this initiative start in 2014? really produce meritable and important amount of result for us after 10 years? And what are your expectations for the autumn?
Thank you very much, Professor Jurovic, dear Minister Ivanovic, dear colleague Ambassador Melson, dear colleagues from the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen. Before answering your question, I still would like to, at the first place, congratulate you and Pan-European Union with its partners for this whole series of Berlin Process conferences underpinned by substantive research, which I think have really broadened and strengthened the basis of consideration for the Berlin Process here in the country and beyond. And I would also like to commend the government of Norway for supporting this process, this series of conferences. And I'm very happy, actually, Minister, that you are here at this Berlin Process panel today, because we are very happy with the excellent participation and buy-in of your government in the Berlin Process. And this relates not only to, you were mentioning it, the fact that Montenegro is the, I believe, only country for the moment that has ratified all the four mobility agreements, but it relates also to the active participation of Montenegro in the process through the foreign ministry, through the so-called Sherpas of the Berlin Process. And I understand from the program that the Berlin Process Sherpa from Montenegro, the foreign policy advisor to the Prime Minister, Milica Perisic, will also be here today and address you. And we are very happy the way you described it, Minister, how Montenegro is fully embracing the Berlin Process for what it is supposed to be. Because there's also this outside perspective, actually, from Germany, as you described it. There are so many communalities in the Western Balkans, and there are so many common interests that ways need to be found for this to materialize, to overcome the obstacles that prevent the countries and the people in the countries from fully benefiting of the cooperation that could and should take place in the Western Balkans. And so this was the idea behind the Berlin Process, to be an informal framework that would promote this regional cooperation and integration within the Western Balkans, but, and this is the important second element, using the EU acquis as a basis, so that regional cooperation and integration at the same time support the 6 countries of the Western Balkans on their way into the EU, of which they all want to become members, as their leaders keep emphasizing. And so in this regard, the Berlin Process was designed to have, and has actually developed into having, I would say, different dimensions. There is, of course, the political dimension I would like to start with. It is 6 countries of the region sitting at the table at an equal footing, including Serbia and Kosovo, and they are jointly agreeing on important things. Only for that, I would say, the Berlin Process is useful. And given the rhetoric we sometimes hear between countries of the Western Balkans, I think, how should I say, the population in all the countries would be surprised if they knew in detail to what extent the countries are ready to sit together and to talk in the context of the Berlin Process. A second dimension, which we believe is important, is the reconciliation dimension, which should help to overcome the obstacles for increased cooperation. Currently, it seems to me that it has become fashionable again from time to raise ethnic, religious, and identity-related tensions, and to emphasize differences instead of promoting togetherness, as I would call it, and to advocate for this idea of dividing the existing cake between groups, instead of, and I think this is very much the philosophy of Prime Minister Spajic, instead of focusing on increasing the cake and then allow everybody at an equal footing to participate in eating it. And we would hope that this would also be something where the Berlin Process can be helpful, overcoming these, how should I say, these prejudices. For example, RICO, Minister, you mentioned it, the Regional Youth Cooperation Office, a child of the Berlin process and modeled after the example of the French-German Youth Office, is very successful at the level of the young people through the Super Schools program, bringing together the students and the schools, through the Youth Cultural Fund, where cultural actors cultural workers across the borders are cooperating now. And I can tell you that together with France and Poland, the revived Weimar Triangle, we plan a new reconciliation initiative along these lines based on the experience of our three countries, which is a difficult one, for this upcoming Berlin summit. And then another dimension, and you were focusing on it, Professor, supporting the 6 countries in reaping the material benefits of increased cooperation and regional integration, namely through the common regional market, green lanes, improved border procedures, the mobility agreements, abolition of the roaming fees, harmonization of standards. All this saves money and benefits the people. And the common regional market was designed within the context of the Berlin process, and the whole action plan has already been worked through, and it has been mentioned. Now we hope that a new action plan to move forward the common regional market will be adopted. And all this, and I need to come back time and again, in line with EU standards, so that this common regional market does not create new barriers towards the outside, but to the opposite, brings all the 6 countries closer to the European Union. And the final dimension, if you allow, jointly addressing global problems. I would like to recall the cybersecurity initiative launched at the summit in 2022, and extremely important, the Green Agenda, which is now supported by the regional climate partnership between Germany and the 6 Western Balkans countries. And here again, the Green Agenda based on the EU acquis, that is on the EU Green Deal, which means bringing at the same time the countries of the region closer to the EU. Now, the relevance of the Berlin process. A lot of initiatives, of multilateral initiatives, are born from time to time as ad hoc measures and to do something, maybe sometimes for a short-term political gain. When we celebrate the 10-year jubilee this year of the Berlin process, we assume that the participants must have some kind of interest in it, otherwise it would have died down. For Germany, you have seen it, it was started by Federal Chancellor Angela Merkel, and it was then fully embraced by Chancellor Olaf Scholz. But what is more important, the 6 countries of the region seem to have a persistent interest in it, because all the agreements that have been mentioned actually are agreements among the 6 countries of the region, and not something which is imposed from the outside. And at the same time, of course, the Berlin process offers an opportunity for third countries, for EU institutions, for UN institutions, for international financial institutions, all those that have an interest in supporting the 6 Western Balkans countries on their way towards reconciliation, towards stability, towards economic development, finally into the EU, to provide targeted support for the initiatives which are taken in the context of the Berlin process, moral, political, but also, you mentioned it, practical and financial support. And well, Germany, as the kick-off idea, came from a German chancellor, and as the process is called Berlin process, we continue to feel a special responsibility to support it as long as there is interest for it in the countries of the region. And we are investing quite some political, logistical, financial effort into the process. And this is why we also applied for hosting the 10-year Jubilee Summit, which was, I understand, agreed by all the participants last year at the summit in Tirana. And now, given that there is more and huge potential for further progress across the whole range of issues that have been mentioned, we want indeed this Jubilee Summit not only to be a celebration, but to achieve ambitious results, such as, it has been mentioned, the adoption of a new action plan to move forward the common regional market, unblock the deadlock between 2 countries on CEFTA, the Central European Free Trade Agreement, and unblocking this would open the door actually for signing quite a number of agreements which are basically radically negotiated, which would really move the common regional market forward. Unblock the deadlock on the mobility agreement concerning mutual recognition of university diploma. Unblock the deadlock within one country on the ratification of the mobility agreement, which would allow free travel without visa and only with ID cards between all the 6 countries of the region. And of course, move forward the implementation of the green agenda, and this time with a special focus on the transport sector. So all this is still work in process. The Sherpas of the participating Western Balkans countries and of the other participating partners work tirelessly. I'm reading this on a daily basis, and our special envoy for the Western Balkans, Manuel Sarrazin, is shuttling in particular through and between the countries that are having the biggest problems to help them find an agreement. This is an ongoing process, but we are optimistic, as Minister Ivanovic is, I understand, that like in previous cases, by 14 October, when the summit will take place, all the 6 countries will be able to come together on some of these disputed efforts to issues in order to make a common effort to make this Jubilee Summit a genuine success with tangible results.
Thank you, Ambassador, for still keeping this optimism. We really need it in our region today. And you passed through whole Berlin process agenda, so no doubt there are a lot of ambitious tasks for all of us. And I like to repeat your first reflection on key characteristics of Berlin process, that is inclusiveness. This is the only current ongoing regional initiative as the highest level political intergovernmental platform where we have that inclusiveness, and it is precondition for efficient decision making for the benefit of citizens. So let's cross our fingers for that agenda for autumn. Ambassador Malcolm, you already mentioned that Norway is not an EU member. We know 2 referenda and whole history, but also from our books and lectures, Norway is fully integrated in the European market, and it is not 450, it is additional 65. So with all of us, it could be even more than 600 million. So let's work on that. So from your perspective, your experience regarding deepening of integration with European Union, what is your perception about this model of strengthening regional cooperation such as Berlin process? What is your perception, and where you can find the space where you can support it?
Well, thank you so much. I hope you can. It's a little strange because I'm looking at you, but then I have the mic here. So I guess I will look at the audience. You think regional cooperation has so many advantages, as has been mentioned from my colleagues here also, and also from the minister, because it shows that if you can cooperate in a regional level, then you could actually cooperate also across. And I think that for us, having already that experience among the Nordic countries, that we could cooperate, we could overcome obstacles, we could find solutions that mutually benefited all. Because, you always have to give and take a little when you should cooperate. It's not, they say it's 2 to tango, but here we have a different dance. I'm not sure exactly which one, but we are much more, we all have to find a common ground, but it shouldn't be too small. It should be, enough, and we have to think about the people. This is for the people. How can our people benefit from this cooperation, and put aside a little some of these kind of more political obstacles sometimes, and the free, as you said, we are integrated in the European Union, and we are a full member of Schengen. And one of the reasons why we are full member of Schengen was because of the already Nordic cooperation. We didn't want to lose this mobility, the freedom to travel without passport, without border control between the Nordic countries. So that was one of the reasons why the cooperation or becoming a member of Schengen, even those in my country, and as you mentioned, we had 2 referendums, and we had kind of very hard core resistance against being member of the European Union. Even those people wanted us to continue to have this freedom of mobility. so that, they saw the benefit for the people. People would not be happy if they could not have this kind of a change of the labor market, of the social benefits, of everything that is very easy when you move around in the Nordic countries. And you have to start somewhere. And like the Nordic countries, we are small countries, each one of us. We have to admit that. And I think, you can see similarities here. You also, quite small countries, smaller population, but together, then you start to become an interesting market. And I try to, in my work now, to convince also investors and businesses in Norway that, don't look at each of the country here. Look at the region. Look at the possibility this region can actually, provide if we find a common ground. And one aspect, well, there are several areas where we see benefits, of course, but you, as the minister said, well, most of you, if you look beside Albania, were in one country. You had the infrastructure, you had everything, you cooperate, this was here, and now it's not the same level, and this is because you could build on, when we come to the electricity, for instance, or the energy, we come to the infrastructure with the train, and I talked with people. Unfortunately, I did not go on this kind of Interrail in the 80s, and I really, really regret that, but a lot of friends of mine did, and they talked about these fantastic trips by train in Yugoslavia, and nowadays you can't. So I don't know if I'm really replying to your question, but if you think about what Norway can do, we have been supporting the Western Balkans for decades, and we will continue, because this is important. This is important for us too, and even as a non-EU member, it's important for our security and stability. And let's not forget that, like Montenegro and North Macedonia and Albania, you are a NATO member, so you are allies also. So you are also part of the same security architecture. Not all of the countries are, but several, and hopefully maybe we could find more, we will see. So we support, for instance, programs where we provide experts to the different countries as a regional project for their EU integration, to help. And then we use experts from the region with knowledge about, the process. So this is one way of supporting. And of course, we also are a bilateral donor to the Western Balkans Investment Framework. This is a way of also support, because we are small, EU is big, but we can also provide both with expertise, but it's not always about money either. It's also about, knowledge. What have we learned from our different processes? What can we actually, how can we contribute also to what's going on here? So this is also a way of contributing. And I think normally I'm a little, not always happy with all these kind of conferences, because I think sometimes that providing expert is much better, but the kind of combination is good, because we also need to make it visible. For instance, when it comes to this with expert, I said I want boots on the ground. It sounds very military, but it's a way of getting people into the different ministries, helping out. So not reinventing the wheel every time. Also, learn from each other is also a very important part of that. And it is how to have this, several of the governments here that talk about economic growth. Yes, and you can achieve economic growth if you start to cooperate much closer. and you will, it's a win-win situation. So trying to have that in mind, and the minister talked about history, and I will not go into our history here now, but it's something about, yes, we cannot change history. We can learn from it, but we should not let history stop us. We need to move forward. We need to watch, when we are driving a car, we shouldn't look in the rear mirror, we should look in front. So we bring with us. We bring with us the history and we can't change it. But let's use it something positive and not something negative.
Thank you, dear Ambassador, for reminding us that we should look more in future. Of course, never forget what was in the past, but let's talk about open discussion and dialogue about future, especially about the future of our region. We are fully aware that we are not Benelux countries, we are not the Baltic countries or a Scandinavian group of countries. We are Western Balkan with the common legacy, country even. As you mentioned, infrastructure is common and a lot of things, including languages. But the future is definitely European integration, and we should fight for that based on own merit approach. So we can open second cycle. And Minister Ivanovic, you already mentioned that when we start to learn European wording, how Yugoslav problems start to be challenges, and a lot of other things. And for instance, how dialogue are enhanced or something like that. Sometimes ordinary people really do not understand what does it mean, but we are here to learn and of course to have a lesson learned. In that context, now we are entering in Hungarian presidency, and it's nice to see that enlargement policy is again on a priority. In the context of that priority agenda for the next phase of European integration process, you mentioned that Montenegro will probably fully participate. From your perspective, what does it really mean, what we can do for that enlargement policy framework? What we can learn from that, and what is your message for improving of our regional cooperation for Montenegro today? Can we do something concrete?
Well, let me just refer to a couple of things previously heard. The ambassador said we need to look in the front mirror. I said sometimes in the rear mirror as well, because sometimes cars are coming from behind you and you need to avoid them, or they need to avoid you. But that gives me a reference that we very often speak about, future versus the past. So sometimes we are faced with a paradox. And this paradox is that we keep saying, let's look at the future, but then we also here face the past. Reconciliation. You cannot do it if you don't look in the rear mirror. So as I said, it is a paradox because it confronts two completely opposite notions, future and the past. What we need to learn to do is to find the right measure between the two. And of course, nobody has present or future without any past. We were all born in the past, and if that past did not happen, then we wouldn't be here and we wouldn't continue to live. But it is very important that we look at the events, just like in life. When you look at the events of the past, from previous years, from your previous jobs, whatever, you don't look at it with grudge. You look at it as something that happened and you moved on. So this is also something that we need to do on a, of course, more broader level, on a political level, but not just political level, also on the level of civil society, academic communities, people to people, and so on. We need to look at things that happened in the past without the grudge and without that being the chief determinant of our present and of our future. Also, when we speak about Western Balkans, I often remember certain people who were and perhaps still are high dignitaries and high officials of the European Union a few years ago. They used the word, thinking that it is a positive term, that Western Balkans is the backyard of European Union. We really don't want to be the backyard, and we are not the backyard. Perhaps a small room in this big house would be nice, perhaps summer gazebo, but not the backyard. Western Balkans is not and should not be seen as a constant source of problems for European Union. This is the heart of Europe, the heart of the Mediterranean. Here people are bright, they have a very, of course, intense temperament, but just like in temper, but just like in any other Mediterranean country. But people are good, are honest, are friendly. They also want to have a good future, common future with their other European peers in other European countries. So I don't want to see Western Balkans as I said, as some sort of source of problems or as some outdated or backdated part of Europe. This is a part of Europe that gave and contributed to the whole European culture and history greatly. And this should also be acknowledged by us and by our friends in the European Union. And I see this new commitment by the European Union and by EU member states towards the enlargement, not just as a result of geopolitical events that we all know greatly contributed to that, but also as re-awareness. So there was an awareness, now we have a re-awareness of the necessity of making Europe complete. And you cannot make Europe complete without countries of the Western Balkans. And I say intentionally Europe, because very often when you go to the European Union countries, there is this identification between European Union and Europe. If we want to identify this, then we need to make the whole Europe united in the European Union and include Western Balkan countries. We were very encouraged already at the beginning of the Belgian presidency. As you know, the Belgian foreign minister was here. She visited Montenegro and she gave us her plans for the 6 months of the Belgian presidency, and we were very encouraged by that. And I'm very happy to say that what she promised, she delivered. So this was not, of course, only the job of Belgium or only the job of EU member states. Most of the job was here in Montenegro, but without the political will of EU member states and without the good job of Belgian presidency, perhaps even our achievements wouldn't be recognized at the end of the Belgian presidency, but perhaps later. But anyway, this happened. It was a very strong and encouraging message on the 26th of June in Brussels. This was the conclusion of the Belgian presidency, so I must say everybody was positive and everybody was happy. On that day, we got the IBAR for chapters 23 and 24, got the closing benchmarks, and now we need to work on that. We were also and are also encouraged by the promises of the Hungarian presidency. I visited Hungary in January and met several times with Foreign Minister Szijjártó. So already then, in January, I was promised that the enlargement is going to be very high on the agenda of the Hungarian presidency, and indeed it will be so. So their messages and their plans are very encouraging for us. The only thing that we need to do is to seize that opportunity. Sometimes here in Montenegro, and not just in Montenegro, we do not seize the opportunities, but we somehow manage to circumvent opportunities and to go into challenges. But I'm really confident that with the positive attitude of Hungary, and this attitude is really positive and honest and sincere, this is my impression, with the good and hard work here in Montenegro, what we can expect is by the end of the year at least one intergovernmental conference, and now I won't say exact numbers because we still don't know, but usually these numbers go from 5 to 10 chapters that could be closed, so hopefully this will happen by the end of the year with Hungarian presidency. If that happens, with interim benchmarks fulfilled, with no matter what number of chapters closed by the end of the year, together with those few others that are provisionally closed, it means that if we keep this tenacity and this pace, we can actually fulfill our promise that the government gave, which is to finish the process on our side by the end of the mandate of the government, which means at latest in the next 3 years, which then opens up the opportunity for the 28 member by 28, or to fulfill the promise that was given last year that by 2030 EU should be ready to accept new members and candidate countries should be ready to become members of the European Union. I must say that it's not all up to us. We also need to see what will happen with the internal reforms of the European Union and the discussion on that. What we constantly keep saying, and I think that this, what we are saying is echoed also by EU member states, is that the enlargement and the internal reform discussion should not be consecutive. They should go hand in hand and in parallel, so that when the internal reform discussion in EU is finished, hopefully within the next 3 or 4 years, we are ready also in the next 3 or 4 years to join EU, and then these very two important moments can coincide. What can we do, you asked, about the regional cooperation? And yes, well, when I entered this room, it was very hot, and I thought that you did it on purpose, so that so that we have also the so that we also have a physical feeling of heated debates that sometimes happen in the region. You know, good neighborly relations and regional cooperation is a pillar of Montenegro's foreign policy. This pillar is not always easy to be fulfilled and to be achieved. We need to realize that. We know it from our personal lives. The most difficulties you have with someone that is closest to you. You don't really care about what someone distant to you says or does. But those that you share space, that you share resources, that you share history, knowledge, culture, those are the ones that you are most sensitive with. And Montenegro does not have one neighbor, does not have two neighbors. It has more than two neighbors. Sometimes also these neighbors don't have good neighborly relations. And sometimes if you do have good neighborly relations with one neighbor, then the other neighbor is angry. So if you have the good neighborly relations with the other neighbor, then the first one is angry. And we need to finally understand that. It's not easy to find some sort of a middle way to be on good terms with everybody all the time. What we want to do is to be on good terms with everybody, but we realize that sometimes this is not possible. It's not possible to be a constant. So it can be always, but it cannot be all the time, perhaps. And as you know, sometimes we have misunderstandings, not just us with some of the neighbors, but those neighbors among themselves, those neighbors with us. And these things happen. They happen in European Union, they happen in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, they happen in every region, and they happen with all neighbors. Sometimes Germany and France don't see things in the same way. Sometimes Benelux countries don't see things in the same way. Sometimes even Scandinavian countries don't have a single view on certain things. The very fact that Norway decided not to be a member of the European Union, and Sweden and Denmark are, but then until recently Sweden was not a member of NATO, but Norway was, it means that these countries had different views of their foreign policies and they had different priorities, but that did not prevent them from cooperating. This is what we also need to realize here. Perhaps we have different views on certain aspects of foreign policy or defense policy, but that does not mean that we cannot cooperate. That does not mean that somebody is going to vanish from this space here. Sometimes we say in our language that we are convicted to each other, but this is a wrong expression. This is not a verdict of a crime, but it is, again, a challenge and an opportunity. And we need to take a look at this challenge and to turn it into an opportunity. And I think we can do that from the Montenegrin point of view. I think we can do that with every neighbor on every issue. There are certain issues with some of the neighbors that are being discussed or should be discussed, but in open and friendly dialogue, all kinds of problems can be solved. And I don't see this as a problem. I see it as an opportunity to meet more, to talk more, and to have more dialogue. And I really hope that all other neighbors will have the same vision and the same attitude towards this kind of discussion. And I can promise that Montenegro really sees it in that way. So we are absolutely open for a genuine, good, friendly, and neighborly dialogue on all issues with all neighbors, on all topics that perhaps are of their interest. So the best thing we can do is to remain open, to remain friendly, and to give our hand to all the neighbors. And I hope everybody accepts it. But on the other hand, what I wanted to say is to get back to the EU and to a more positive message is to repeat that I really am very convinced that we can do a lot and that we can do a good job by the end of this year. Hungary is going to help. This is sort of a promise from their side, and I believe it. And I also hope that all other EU member states will understand that this opportunity needs to be seized, because if it is not seized with Montenegro, which is a front runner in the European integration process, then I'm afraid that all other candidate countries are going to be discouraged, and this is not something that we should permit. So Montenegro will do everything in its power to keep the whole process of enlargement alive and feasible in real time, not as a never-ending process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. This is the case, my dear pan-European friends, when you have a minister with a PhD in philosophy and religious studies. So it is always much broader and very diplomatic. Thank you, dear Minister, for explaining us these tiny differences between always and anytime. In context of our regional cooperation, it is not really easy to understand and always to follow. Thank you for this optimism and for this solid diplomatic foundation for expectation in next presidency and further regarding this very positive expectation 28 in 28. It looks like nice. But let's at least reduce this hot temperature with one question as additional contribution to debate. In spite of our full cooperation on Berlin summit in October, for instance, new agreement, deblockade of CEFTA, 10 decisions, and new agreement, and further new action plan for common regional market, we plan something for December. And then, do you have any feeling that we can be blocked in that plan?
I think I replied in my last utterance in the previous answer when I said that I hope that all EU members are going to understand the importance of this process and the importance of this process continuing, because these are not phrases anymore. Montenegro is really at the moment a poster child for European Union integration, the first country ever that fulfilled the interim benchmarks in chapters 23 and 24 according to the new methodology. So we can be used an example for other candidate countries that need to fulfill the same criteria. And if we are blocked for any kind of reason, except for the reason of not fulfilling the standards and criteria from the negotiation chapters, then I would say, and I dare to say, that the EU dream in Western Balkans is dead. And I really hope that no EU member will allow such thing to happen. So I'm confident that everybody has enough rationality and enough vision not to allow it.
Thank you for this additional comment. And let's keep that optimism. Of course, in spite of criticism of civil society, it's our common interest for the benefit of Montenegro to have dynamic integration process in the future, if it will be possible. Ambassador Felten, I have one question additionally regarding our topic in the context of the current phase of Montenegro European integration. What do you think, how significant in the future affirmation of regional cooperation could be, in fact, this Berlin process and your continuous and strong support for stability in the region?
Yes. Let me make two caveats. I'm an economist by profession, so I'm always less reflected and much shorter, and I'm sitting behind the EU flag, although I have no mandate whatsoever to speak on behalf of the EU, so it's just about the German position. And I would like to, as a first part of your answer, I would like to emphasize the relationship between the Berlin process and the EU accession process, which actually there was this myth that in 2014 the Berlin process was meant to somehow replace or be ersatz or compensation, which has never been the case. But as you were mentioning the EU growth plan for the Western Balkans, if you look at that one, you now see this very close link, because the EU growth plan has 4 dimensions. Now I need to relate to my papers. And one of them, anyway, apart from the facility with the 400 million euro and and that's the issue, promoting of a common regional market as a step towards. And this is where these are beautifully married, the EU accession process, or one of the examples, and the Berlin process. When you ask about regional cooperation, it's always a question of the past and of the future and how the one affects the other. Of course, regional cooperation needs to take into account the past, and then the question is how you deal with the past, whether you use the past to settle accounts or whether you use the past to learn lessons and improve on that. And I will not elaborate on the region. I mean, my country, Germany, has a very heavy and sad recent past. We are responsible for a Holocaust, and we have recognized this responsibility, and we have tried to learn a lesson from that, like, for example, in school education, to openly and frankly and without any reserve teach our young people about what has been done by Germany, what has been done in the name of Germany, so that nobody can say that, oh, it's not true, it's not that bad. I mean, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, all these things are continue raising their ugly head. And it's a continuous work, it's a continuous process which needs to be addressed. So we cannot forget about the past, we try to do something out it, to make something out it. Like, for example, our effort, our responsibility actually, as we see it, to try to do what we can with our limited forces to prevent any further genocides from happening around the world. And this is why we supported the Rwanda resolution at the time, and now the Srebrenica resolution. Regional cooperation within the region will work only if the past is properly faced with a forward-looking perspective for a better future. I mean, it's huge what I'm saying, but I think there's no way around. Now, when it comes to regional cooperation between Western Balkans countries and members and countries which are already in the EU, then of course the accession dimension, the accession perspective comes in. There are some who are sitting on the table, others who aspire to be sitting at the table, and unfortunately those sitting at the table decide when and how others will be able to join the table, and it is supposed to be by consensus. Now, there are sometimes bilateral issues, and my government's position is very clear. Bilateral issues which can be solved bilaterally, and I emphasize solved, not put under the carpet, should be settled bilaterally, and they should not become subject of the EU accession process in any case. And we've made that very clear. It's not happening all the time, because this is not a football match where there is a referee that takes the decisions and says who abides by the rules or who does not, and it is not, there's no video referee who then measures the centimeters and says what is right and wrong. This is politics, and therefore I believe that when it comes to regional cooperation between member states and countries wanting to become member states, that it is simply in the best interest of the candidate countries, maybe sometimes to go the extra mile, maybe sometimes to be more forthcoming when it comes to addressing bilateral issues. And at the same time, we count on all EU member states that have bilateral issues with candidate countries, that they always carefully look what are the really hard issues that need to be addressed, and what are issues which have been artificially raised by some actors that are not so happy about what is going on, and then assess the respective issues on the merit of the case. I think this is the spirit of regional cooperation within the region, and for the moment still between the region and the EU, soon being together. And this is also very much this what underpins the Berlin process, the identifying what actually the best interest is, and emphasizing this common interest instead of emphasizing things which are actually to the detriment of all, if we are honest. I mean, of all people, of all citizens, of all people living in the Western Balkans countries. Something like that.
Thank you, Ambassador, for additional diplomatic contribution and for your advices for our countries of our region. Sometimes it looks like fragile, and the problems are somehow bigger than they are really. And do hope that we will find a way how we can overcome that. And of course, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. It is first lecture in the accession process. But let's keep our optimism that our open questions will be solved in that sense. And I like also wording of another European formula, win-win solution. Somehow to find the model how each side will have perception that it is okay, that everybody somehow benefited of that dialogue, and at the end of the day to have progress and to be part of the process. Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Mason, you are a very careful listener. You see how it is quite complicated with member states and candidates sometimes. But from your perspective, when we talk about national intervention for Montenegro, you look at maybe shortly in our recommendations, and you are our strong supporter. Where you, as a Norway and country with so huge experience for integration into the Europe in all this context, where you can see this small space of opportunity where you can support our further efforts on European integration path. You mentioned expertise, you mentioned NATO as area also. So what do you think, where we can expect some kind of your support, and what can strengthen our position in accession talk?
Thank you. So, and since my colleagues here mentioned their background, I will also mention my background. I'm a military officer. I have a military background, so very different from my two colleagues. That doesn't mean that I'm very aggressive, but I have learned patience. As is important part of that. And I remember when I joined the Foreign Service and they asked me, why on earth should we choose somebody like you with that kind of background? And I had to explain that I said, one thing a military office does not want is to go to war. So as I also kind of, the peace part, you know, if you are in the ditches, you don't want to be there, I can assure you. When it comes to what we can do, well, I will relate a little to what we have done and maybe to build on also. So one thing that we have been supporting and that we can look into again is when it comes to the strengthening of the judicial institutions. I know that that is a very important part in the Western Balkans, in all countries, but now we're talking about Montenegro in particular, I guess, but doesn't mean that Montenegro is kind of the worst example here, not at all, but that is some place that we could support. And of course, everything into the socio-economic development, which we also have done. It's important in these kind of small markets where there are a lot of small and medium enterprises, local businesses, to give them the tools to build on that, and that way you create prosperity. And also, you know, how can we help? And I don't know if my German colleague will be happy when I say this, you know, to avoid the brain drain, you know, how can we help you to create the situation here that people, actually young people, would like to stay, to build their country, and not go to Germany or Norway or other countries. This is also, I know that this is important for the government also, you know, how to keep the brightest here. It's not easy. And of course, being part of, like us at the inner market, this is free flow, and people will move. But I can give you one example. For many years in Norway, we had lots of workers from Poland and from Lithuania in particular, and now they move back because the growth in their own country, you know, have actually made it possible for them to have their life in their home country. So, you know, the EU has actually contributed to growth in the countries, in the member countries, so that they do not see the same need to move abroad. We are always best at home when it comes at the end. And then, of course, the ambassador mentioned cyber. I think, you know, after the huge attack that you had here on government institutions, cyber is, of course, very broad, but it's very important and something that we need to attack together or to help each other together. And it goes into the security, but it goes in so much broader than that. And also the same with the green agenda, and Norway being an expert in particular on hydro energy, but renewable energy as such, you know, are there any way we can maybe assist or contribute in the development and of greener and eco-friendly power plants, for instance. That could also be an area where we have expertise, and actually recent expertise also in dealing with it in much more environmental friendly way than what we did, you know, in the 50s or 60s. I think, you know, we have talked about the infrastructure is huge, and we all need to, you know, we can, you know, collaborate on that part, and of course innovation and digitalization is always something that where we also can have expert. Yeah, I think there are areas, and I have 3 more years of my assignment here, and I hope to come back, and I will really look forward to collaborate with all of you, and so thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. You cover really significant areas, very important, all of them, and thank you for thinking about that in future during your mandate and generally regarding support from your country towards Montenegro and the region. We have just a few times to the end of this panel, but it is placed for you. If somebody like to raise a question for our minister or our guest ambassadors, now is time. My colleague from our research team, Professor Mehmedin Tahirović. So definitely the question is from the area of security.
Hvala profesorice Đurović na predstavljanju. Naravno, ja sam jedan od učesnika tima koji je radio ovaj dio. Za ministra Ivanovića vrlo je kompleksna bezbjednosna situacija i u okruženju i na globalnom planu, naravno i u Crnoj Gori se to reflektuje, kao što vidite, različitim podjelama i različitim gledištima različitih političkih subjekata, i to se različito i reflektuje na građane Crne Gore. I možemo reći da Crna Gora trenutno nije baš stabilno društvo, to je i po ocjeni evropskih određenih zvaničnika. Molim vas, recite mi u ovome dijelu, vi ste prije rekli da Crna Gora će nastojati da uspostavlja potpuno ravnopravnu saradnju sa svima u regionu, ali da li svi u regionu žele tako da se ponašaju i prema Crnoj Gori, i da li smatrate da neke od država od regiona, kažem država, nisam rekao države, imaju određene ambicije prema Crnoj Gori koje baš nisu prijateljske i koje mogu u budućnosti izazvati ili blokadu Crne Gore na putu ka Evropskoj uniji ili je destabilizovati? Hvala vam lijepo.
Hvala. Odgovorit ću na našem, pošto je pitanje postavljeno na našem. Ja se ne bih složio da Crna Gora nije stabilno društvo. Ono što mi ovdje imamo naravno jedan politički i društveni dijalog, imamo različite političke i društvene aktere koji ne misle isto. Oni konfrontiraju svoja mišljenja u javnoj debati, bilo u medijima, bilo u parlamentu i na ovakvim konferencijama i na sličnim mjestima. Nisam primijetio da smo imali u posljednje vrijeme neki destabilizujući događaj. Izvještaji iz bezbjednostnog sektora su takvi da govore da je situacija bezbjednostna u Crnoj Gori stabilna. Ona je stabilna, ali se naravno može narušiti određenim pojedinačnim događajima. Slične smo imali na Cetinju nedavno. To je nešto što je, nažalost, dio života svake države, kriminal. Bezbjednostni sektor mora da se sa tim kriminalom obračunava. Juče je bila konferencija za štampu direktora policije i pomoćnika policije koji su rekli da su rasvijetlili taj slučaj na Cetinju. Ja ga namjerno pominjem zato što je on upravo izazvao veliko uznemirenje među građanima, jer se radilo o jednom napadu, eksplozivnom napravom u jutarnjim časovima, blizu škole, blizu sportskog centra na Cetinju. Dakle, moglo je da bude mnogo širih posljedica. Međutim, kao što rekao, to su stvari koje se dešavaju i rešavaju iz dana u dan. Što se tiče političke situacije, ja mislim da je ona mnogo bolja danas nego što je bila prije 3, 4 ili 5 godina. Mi smo prije 3, 4 i 5 godina imali različite vrste protesta sa različitih strana, sa različitim ciljevima, različite masovnosti. Toga u posljednje vrijeme nema ili ga ima mnogo manje. Mislim da se pokazala takođe i jedan zavidan stepen političke zrelosti, naročito u domenu evropskih integracija. Vi ste vidjeli da od kraja prošle godine, kad su izglasana prva imenovanja u pravosuđu, pa sve do prije nekoliko sedmica kad je izglasano 12 zakona koji su bili bitni upravo za dobijanje IBAR-a, svi ti procesi su prošli praktički bez glasa protiv. Dakle, čak ni opozicija, koja je naravno imala neke svoje kritike, primjedbe i slično, za neke stvari, odnosno za neka imenovanja u pravosuđu nije glasala, to jest nije se izjasnila, ali nije bilo glasova protiv. To je takođe nešto što je bilo bitno da pošaljemo poruku i našim građanima, ali i evropskim partnerima, da kada se radi o glavnom državnom interesu Crne Gore, a to je pristupanje Evropskoj uniji, ne postoje disonantni tonovi u parlamentu, odnosno ne postoji niko od političkih predstavnika koji su zavrijedili toliko povjerenje građana da budu u parlamentu, ko bi tu vrstu puta na neki način spriječio ili obstruirao. Dakle, tu smo pokazali jedno apsolutno nacionalno jedinstvo. Kad smo pokazali nacionalno jedinstvo što se tiče državnog interesa, to je Evropska unija, svako se naravno vratio nekim svojim možda partikularnim interesima i potrebama, kako u vladajućoj većini, tako i u opoziciji. Dakle, nema potrebe da razdvajamo opoziciju ili većinu. Ja to mogu reći kao dio izvršne vlasti. Pojedinačni akteri i većine i opozicije su se vratili svojim partikularnim interesima i pokušavaju ih, što je potpuno prirodno, ostvariti i realizovati. S druge strane, ono što sam ja takođe siguran jeste da kada u narednom periodu ponovo dođu na dnevni red neke stvari ili pitanja koja se tiču evropskih integracija ili sličnih državnih interesa Crne Gore, ja očekujem i potpuno sam uvjeren da će tako i biti, ponovo tu vrstu jedinstva i konsenzusa među političkim i društvenim akterima. Što se tiče odnosa u regionu, oni su, kao što sam ja već rekao, kompleksni i to nema potrebe da krijemo. Ja i dalje smatram da postoji toliko toga, odnosno mnogo više toga što nas spaja od onoga što nas razdvaja i smatram da treba da insistiramo upravo na tim stvarima koje nas spajaju, a ne na tim stvarima koje nas razdvajaju. Nekad to prosto nije moguće. Neka se to ne desi ni u Crnoj Gori, neka se ne desi u nekim drugim državama okruženja, ali na vaše pitanje ja neću, naravno, iz pozicije u kojoj se nalazim, ni imenovati države, ni insinuirati na bilo šta, ali ću samo reći da očekujem da se sve države, bilo da su one članice Evropske unije ili ne, odnose prema Crnoj Gori onako kako se Crna Gora odnosi prema njima, s poštovanjem njihove nezavisnosti i suvereniteta i unutrašnjih pitanja koje mogu da rešavaju samostalno, i takođe da insistiramo na ovome što sam rekao, da pričamo o tome što nas spaja, a ne što nas razdvaja, i da od onih koji su članice Evropske unije i članice NATO-a, pa smo samim tim i saveznici, očekujemo dobru saradnju, podršku na evropskom putu, kao što je to bio slučaj u prethodnom periodu, a po priznanju nekih država iz regiona ni u prethodnom periodu, kad su odnosi bili jako dobri, se ni jedno pitanje koje oni smatraju otvorenim nije riješilo. A ja vam obećavam da ćemo, ako budemo imali prilike, mi riješiti nekoliko, to jest ova vlada, i već se na tome radi, a od drugih država koje nisu članice još uvijek Evropske unije i nisu članice NATO-a, takođe očekujem međusobno uvažavanje, poštovanje, dobru saradnju u onim oblastima koje nas spajaju, a ima ih zaista mnogo, od ekonomije preko turizma i kulture, i zaista treba ovaj region makar na neko vrijeme da odahne od različitih konfliktnih situacija i da se posveti jednom dobrom životu, prosperitetu i napretku svih njegovih građana, jer na kraju krajeva, kao što sam već rekao, niko neće nestati s ovoga prostora, ne možemo se negdje preseliti, nego smo tu jedni s drugima i treba da učinimo najbolje što možemo da taj zajednički život bude što bolji.
Hvala ambasadoru, ministru Ivanoviću, evo vam slutim. Pa dobro, ako ne danas, sutra neki dan sigurno. Jedno u diplomatiji, uvijek u diplomatiji. Hvala vam na ovom odgovoru. Posebno se zahvaljujem na ovoj dobroj namjeri da se u odnosima jačanja regionalne saradnje zemlje međusobno uvažavaju, posebno njihove institucije. I sa tom, da kažem, dobrom porukom bih i završila ovaj panel. Mislim da smo dobili dosta dobrih analiza i da možemo zajedno oko toga dosta zaključiti te preporučiti našim donosiocima odluka ponešto od ovoga